Hey all, and welcome to my project Stone Arrowheads Knapping and Testing. This is my final project for Anthropology 502, lithic analysis. Jumping right into it here, we have a arrowhead that I'm making. This is Georgetown flint, and I have a flake here that I used hard hammer percussion via hammerstone to take off of a larger core. And now this is a relatively sped up video of me using soft hammer percussion as well as a little bit later pressure flaking in order to reduce the size, get it down into sort of the shape that I'm looking for here. Here's a pressure flaker that I used, just a small antler tine, in order to get it into that triangular shape that I'm looking for. I wasn't looking to recreate any particular arrowheads here in this project. I just wanted to make something simple, easy to haft onto a wooden dowel, so notched at the bottom, and just something that I thought would fly relatively even, as little warping and twisting in the stone as possible, though I did find that, spoiler, but in the one that I shot, the twisting in the arrowhead did not seem to impact the flight of the arrow itself too much. So looking ahead, that's a little shout out to that. Here we have sort of the shape that I'm looking for, pretty much all completed there. And then I'm going to put notches in the bottom just to make my life easier with hafting, give me something to kind of fit that sinew into in order to make it stick onto the dowel a lot better. This was a super long process. This is about 2 hours nearly of flintknapping kind of reduced down, so I'll spare you all of the time spent on that. Here we have the wooden dowels that I used. I had to split them pretty good in order to fit the arrowheads. I used 3/8 inch wooden dowels. In retrospect, that was way too small, but that was the same diameter as my modern arrows, so that's what I went with. I then took this low temperature hot glue, sort of filled up the entire crack that I made in the dowel, that sort of split area, with as much hot glue as I could get in there. I really wanted to keep this secure, and since I had to split the dowel so far, I wanted to really fill it up with glue. It's not super secure here, so I'll then wrap it with sinew, but as you can see, you've kind of got to wedge it in there quickly because the glue dries very quick. And it doesn't look super secure, yeah, so this is where the artificial sinew that I have is going to come into play to really cinch that down, but it's a good place to start with the glue. So yep, here's the artificial sinew. This is basically just waxed cordage, pretty thin. I start below where I split the dowel, start wrapping it as tightly as I can, holding tension. That way I can kind of re-secure the dowel since I split it so far, as well as like keep that tension. Since I start so low and work up towards the arrowhead, it's actually going to sort of like squeeze the two halves of the dowel together and pinch the arrowhead in place, or at least that was my theory. So that's sort of what I went with there. The notches that I put in the arrowheads made it super easy to secure it. I just sort of made like an X pattern at the top and then just absolutely wrapped it as many times as I thought was reasonable, which was quite a lot. After I clip the end of the artificial sinew, I then took more of that low temperature hot glue and just sort of like press down the edge. It's quite cool to the touch, so you don't have to worry too much about like burning your hands or anything like that. So I just use my fingers to kind of smish it all down and try to avoid any like big bumps of glue or anything like that might hinder the flight of the arrow. Not that I particularly noticed anything about that, but I did want to give it the best shot as possible to fly correctly, fly straight, fly flat. So that's what I'm working on here. So just to show you guys all of the arrowheads mounted onto the shafts here, I could just sort of show you all of them that I did. I only used 2 different materials. There's Georgetown flint, that's that gray one right there. And then this sort of pink material is heat-treated Keokuk chert. Both are very similar in terms of their fragility and hardness, easy to work with. I felt pretty comfortable working with these because I've used them a lot in the past, so that's sort of why I chose these two particular materials, as well as that's just what I had a good amount of, so it made sense to use it. I had a lot of flakes of these guys. As you can see, every arrowhead's a little bit different. Again, I wasn't really shooting for any particular shape, I was just kind of working with the flakes themselves. Next step here, as you can see, is the fletching of the arrowheads. This was extremely difficult. I had not anticipated how hard it would be. I did originally try to use a stone flake to do this cutting down of the feathers. Really hard to do. I did resort to a box cutter because I just needed the precision, and actually I ended up using my nails to scrape out a lot of that sort of like middle of the quill material in the turkey feathers. They just did not like to cooperate. So yeah, use a lot of modern tools, scissors, box cutters, things like that. Since I'm just splitting them here, I'm basically trying to cut them down into these shapes like this so that I can use this little paper guide that I created in order to cut my feather shapes. This guide was taken directly from the fletching on my modern arrows because I wasn't really looking too hard into or overthinking what the feathers needed to look like. I just wanted to sort of replicate what I knew worked, and that's what I kind of settled on with this shape. I did try to leave like a little bit of the sort of like central quill material on the turkey feathers because I was using that to secure them down to the wooden dowels. So that's kind of what you can see there. Here we go, wrapping some hemp cordage sort of at that spot where I want the bottom of the fletching to sit. I do this so that I can get it started, create tension on the shaft of the arrow so that my cordage isn't going to slip out of place. I didn't glue this down, I just tied it on. And that's sort of my guide for where the arrows are going to sit. So then I place the arrow and, keeping tension on the cordage, start to wrap it. This was very tedious, holding them in place, and the placement of the actual feathers is replicated also from my modern arrows. As you can see, there are two feathers sort of directly opposing each other, and then this one that I just put there is in between the two that are opposing each other. This leaves right here this like back area that doesn't have any feathers on it, and that's so that it can like slide past my bow without running into my bow or somehow altering its flight path. Of course, the cordage was possibly going to hit my bow somewhat, but I wanted to minimize that as much as possible. So here we go, super glue. Super gluing the feathers onto the wooden dowel. This was not super fun. The super glue, I think, stuck more to my fingers than it did to the feathers, but it was by far the best option that I tried. The hot glue was way too thick and hard to work with and didn't really stick super well to the wooden dowel in the way that I wanted it to. I tried wood glue. That also was not really sticky enough for the like really thin nature of the feathers, so super glue it was. It would be really interesting to try in the future a more liquid form of glue that I could sort of brush on to the feathers. I think that would help. But this worked just fine for this initial experiment. Once I get them all three glued down painstakingly, I then wrap them with this hemp cordage at the top. I really wanted to be sure that they were going to stick on when I shot them, and I was not convinced that they would, so I probably went overboard with the amount of hemp cordage that I used, but I figured better too much than not enough, and trying to re-stick feathers when I'm, out shooting them, I wasn't sure if I was going to be outside and how cold, so I really wanted to make sure that I did everything I could ahead of time. And yes, so that's sort of the finalized fletching. As you can see in this video, it's far from perfect, but I was relatively proud with how it turned out. Here we have some clips of the failures. The knocking of the arrows was really difficult. They did not want to knock on my bowstring. The wooden dowels were splitting when I tried to fire them. That's what happened in these two clips. And then we had a success. This was really shocking to me. I did not think it would work. It obviously did not hit the target because, you know. But yeah, that was the project, and I look forward to trying out more stuff and seeing where I can take this. Thanks!